So there's three keys that you talk about in your book, How to Raise an Intuitive Eater. And I love that there's just three because I feel like as a parent, that's about how much I can handle or keep in my
Yeah.
mind at once. And the three keys are the first one being unconditional love and support of your children's body. The second one being flexible and reliable eating routines. And the third one being developing your intuitive eating voice. And I'd love to break those down so that our listeners can really feel like they have tangible takeaways. Okay, this is what I'm going to try out with my kids. As you said, in this journey, it's a process. But the first one about unconditional love and support of your children's body. Oh my gosh, if there's like a wish I have for all children is that they would feel that, right? They'd feel it from their parents, they'd feel it from their communities. And in a lot of ways, it's a social activism move to love all bodies of different shapes, sizes, colors, abilities, preferences. And how do you actually do that? What does it look like? What is the languaging you're using with kids? And maybe what are some of the blinders that we don't know we have on, things that may trip us up and that we're doing that we don't really know is actually not showing unconditional love.
That's right. What you said about creating an inclusive world and inclusive spaces and safe spaces for all bodies, that this really is a social justice issue. And so it's another thing that parents really connect with often is like, oh right, when we're judging bodies, some bodies are good and some bodies are not good, and that's what we're teaching kids to do. So coming from that place, supporting your child and having unconditional love and support for their body. If you ask any parent, they're going to say, of course I do. Of course I have unconditional love and support for my child's body. And that's then where we need to pause and think, okay, well, in what moments or in what circumstances might your child not really be feeling that? For example, if a parent has more than one child at home and maybe they live in different size and shape bodies, and maybe one child is told things or hears things about what they're allowed to eat or how much they should eat or what they should have that's different from their sibling, and kids pick up on everything, right? So they'll learn very, very quickly that this is about because my body is a certain way and my parent maybe wants to help me change my body or thinks that I should be doing something differently to manage my body.
And certainly gender plays a role in that too, in terms of some of the research on how parents feed girls versus feed boys, how parents talk to girls versus talk to boys, and the even just the little subtle things of making comments about girls' bodies in a certain way and different comments about boys' bodies, right? Like that boys are strong and girls are, pretty. Whatever, all these little subtle things that we may be doing and we don't even know that we're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we use an acronym in this chapter of the book to help kind of dive in a little deeper for parents. And the acronym we use is REAL, REAL, and that stands for Reduce Body Shame, Embrace Their Needs, Be Present with Your Child, and Help Them Feel Seen. The A is for accepting their desires and their appetite. And the L is for loving their body the way it is today. Don't try to make it something it isn't. So I feel like even those four kind of direction are jumping off points for parents to see, oh, like, how do we reduce body shame? That's really in the way that we talk about not just our child's body, but the way that we talk about our own body or our partner's body or a stranger's body. And these are things that are just all too common in our conversations, and kids are hearing them. So we might comment on the way that a family member's body has changed over the year, or they should look like this, or they should be doing this, or they need to be exercising more. All of those things are also communicating to our children there's a right way to have a body.
I also think there's an element of children will make comments about bodies that are different or about bodies that they haven't seen a lot of. And how we respond to those comments is also really important because I think in some ways, if we shut down the child or shame the child for making a comment or questioning, why does this person have this body size that's different than what I see in my family? What we end up doing is lose the opportunity to talk about body diversity And that is one of the things that I think takes that psychological flexibility as a parent is like, okay, I'm going to step into a conversation that maybe I have my own biases and my own discomfort with, that is really important to step into with our children, to talk about diversity and differences in a positive way, and have your house be a place where we can have these types of conversations. So it kind of goes both ways, right? It's like not making certain kind of commentary and refraining from patterns that you've just been habituated by culture or your own family to make comments, but then also stepping into conversations that maybe you would normally just want to like not talk about with my kids.
Yeah, I think, one of the examples that comes up a lot is when kids kind of reach that age, maybe 3, 4, 5-ish, where they start commenting on observations they have about our bodies. And that is, a huge trigger for parents in terms of bringing up shame or bringing up uncomfortable memories or painful memories or even trauma. And we have an urge to have an automatic reaction to these comments that our children are making from a place of really just curiosity and observation. But because of our own, body story and body memory, we become either fearful or threatened or very reactive. So that is an opportunity, though, to like really pause and notice what's happening. Okay, my child just said this, and immediately my body feels, tight or tingly, or like I want to run away or I want to be mad at them. But can I notice that this is about them being curious and that this is a really wonderful opportunity to model to them that I can look at my body in a curious way and I can celebrate my body, even if I don't think it's, quote, perfect. Or I can, at the very least, allow them to see me for who I am in this moment without kind of covering it up in this shame story that, or apologizing for my body.
I remember when my oldest was about 5, and one of the things that he really got into at that time was my stomach and pushing on my stomach, almost like kneading bread. And we'd read stories together and he'd want to knead my stomach. And it brought up, I could feel my old shame story be activated around my stomach. So for me, my shame story is around my stomach and being a young girl and actually watching my mom and her relationship with her stomach and her hating her stomach and learning to hate my stomach, and then spending a lot of years sucking it in and keeping my stomach in at all costs. So when he would do that, I could feel that be activated. And it led to actually some healing for me around my own body because he loved it. He loved how squishy it was and how warm it was, and just being in that cozy space. And it really took psychological flexibility to not say stop. I mean, if I needed him to say stop, I could, but really to see, our own bodies through the eyes of our children, which is not always a critical view. It can often be a very loving view. So it can kind of go both ways. Our children help us heal our relationship as well.
Yeah, I absolutely relate. I've had a lot of those experiences. And, when we were writing the book, which really was like about 2 years ago now, my kids were 2 and 4. And so, absolutely, just right in that age. And I remember how many moments I had noticing these really kind of strong reactions to things that they were saying or doing to my body. And it was new because I was going through it kind of for the first time, and how important I felt it was that we talked about this stuff in the book, because this is a very kind of universal parenting experience, and we deserve to be able to, you know, notice those feelings and honor those feelings that we have, while also thinking about if we can kind of rewrite the narrative a little differently for the kids.
Okay, so the second key is about developing a flexible and reliable eating routine. And I'd love for, we have flexibility on one side and reliability on the other, and they sometimes can feel at odds. And I think as parents, we're constantly trying to balance those two. Tell us about that. How do you envision that in your book, and how do you help parents do that with their kids?
Yeah, it was actually a tricky thing to kind of really hash that out and explain. The flexibility is so important here, but you don't have flexibility if you don't have a routine in the first place. So there is no flexibility if it's just unplanned randomness. But essentially, kids need us to be the caregiver. They need us to be in control of when we're going to get food on the table or when they're going to have their next meal and their next snack. That creates a whole lot of safety in their experience in knowing that they're going to be fed and there will be a next meal. It also allows them to feel safer in experiencing hunger, that it's not going to be this ongoing unfulfilled hunger, but it's hunger and we can feel it and notice it. And then we can be excited when we get that next meal. So often intuitive eating for kids is not understood and it's thought of as it's a free for all. It's kids deciding what they're eating when they're eating. And that's just totally not what it is at all. An important part of raising an intuitive eater is setting up this feeding routine or just sort of this gentle structure of when meals and snacks are coming so that we can set kids up to really rely on those internal signals of how hungry they are for the food. And then when you start a meal with a level of hunger, you will actually be able to more clearly feel the difference when some satiety starts to set in. So if we don't have a routine or structure for kids, there could be just grazing ongoing. And some of the times with kids that's just going to be the case, but for the most part, we want to help support them with this pattern so that they can feel that hunger and have an opportunity to get satiated for the meal during the meal.
Okay, so a lot of questions show up around this flexible, reliable situation here. Things that I think if you just think about a kid eating throughout the day, well, first, there's developmental differences. How you're going to have a flexible, reliable routine is different for an infant versus a toddler versus a grade school student versus a teenager, right? Like these totally, it changes over time. But I'm just thinking about how many times, you just fed your kid breakfast, you cleaned up the kitchen, and now the kid is hungry or says they're hungry or they want a snack. And if you're raising an intuitive eater, imagine you're balancing lots of things. Like you're balancing, okay, I want to listen to my child saying that they're hungry and respond to that. But at the same time, as a parent, I'm dealing with, wait, I just cleaned the whole kitchen and you had breakfast. Can't we just wait until snack time? How do you navigate some of those things that are outside of the reliable routine without squashing your child's intuitive eating process?
So that is going to look a little different for every family. I don't at all want to paint this picture that there is just one right way or like a set of rules for how do we respond when this happens? How do we respond when this happens? We need to take what we call a responsive feeding approach. So that is thinking about your child as an individual, a unique person that, and just kind of taking a little bit of a assessment of what the situation is. So, could it be that they really didn't get enough to eat? And can I grab a quick snack for them and say, okay, if you need this, have it at the table? That might work sometimes. Some other times it just might not work for the family or work for the parent to go ahead and get more food out. And in that case, we need to be, I think, transparent and honest and straightforward with the child and say, okay, I hear you. We're going to have snack in 30 minutes or we're going to have snack in an hour. What would you like to do until then? So, communication is really key, but straightforward communication so that a child, in a way that they can understand, so that they can make sense of and feel, like I said, safe about when that next meal or snack is coming, is really important.
Yeah, I think it maps onto how we would eat for ourselves as adults if we're intuitively eating. Sometimes you can't get another snack in because I'm having an interview right with you right now. So hopefully I ate enough beforehand to make it through, but I'm not going to pause and eat or eat on this interview. But then sometimes you would, make sure if you really need to eat something to make that happen. So it's also kind of teaching your child about flexibility. And I think uh, being honest, being radically honest and having your kids understand some of the decision making that you're going through is helpful because then it helps them in the future be able to use that type of languaging for themselves and their own decision making around food, which kind of links to that third key, which has to do with using an intuitive eating voice, or cultivating an intuitive eating voice with your children. And maybe you can break that down for us a bit about what that means to have an intuitive eating voice.
So that means a couple different things. One of the meanings or the uses for it is that what kids hear us say does lead into becoming their own kind of internal narrative. So that's everything from what we say about our own eating and our own bodies to how we actually communicate with them about food. So, for example, or kind of with the last example of when you may need to say no, we're not having any food right now. It's very different to say no because of what it is they're asking for. Like if they're asking for some chips or some candy, and you're saying no from a diet mentality place because of the type of food it is, versus if you're saying no with a reason that they can understand that doesn't plant these seeds of diet thinking that it's like, well, mom or dad said that we're just not having snack right now, so I have to deal with that. Versus, oh, every time I ask for an Oreo, mom gets upset or kind of moody or mad at me. Those are very different ways to say no and reasons for saying no. Developing and using your intuitive eating voice also is really important for the readers of this book who are new to intuitive eating or who are trying to heal from diet culture in their own lives for themselves and their kids, because really there's so much overlap. The way that we are going to be approaching food for kids is also the way that we kind of need to reparent our own selves and have compassion for ourselves and our bodies and our appetites is really the same that we want to be showing to our kids. So that voice really shows up in all these different ways and helps us with ourselves and our kids too.